My name is Arthur Pendleton, and for the better part of my 72 years, I have lived a life measured in quiet moments and small, deliberate joys. I spent 4 decades as a claims adjuster for a respectable insurance firm, a profession that teaches you to listen more than you speak and to observe the minute details people so often overlook. It's a job that strips away the dramatic flourish of a story and leaves you with the stark, unvarnished facts. After my wife, Helen, passed away 7 years ago, those skills became less a profession and more a way of navigating the profound silence she left behind. My home, a sturdy 2-story craftsman on a street lined with aging oak trees in the quiet town of Cordova Falls, became my sanctuary. Its predictable creaks and groans were the rhythm of my days. My life was a tapestry woven from simple threads: the morning crossword, the scent of fresh coffee, the well-tended roses in Helen's garden, and the weekly phone calls with my daughter, Eleanor. Eleanor, my Ellie, is the brightest thread in that tapestry. She has her mother's compassionate heart and, I'd always believed, her mother's sound judgment. Which is why, when she called me on a crisp Tuesday in October, her voice tight with a kind of fear I hadn't heard since she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms, the quiet order of my world began to fray at the edges. "Dad," she began, her voice wavering. We need help." I set my teacup down, the clink of porcelain against the saucer sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Ellie, what's wrong? Are you all right?" A choked sob came through the line. "Mark, he lost his job. His whole department was eliminated last month. He didn't want to worry me, so he kept it to himself, trying to find something else before the savings ran out." She took a ragged breath. "The savings are gone, Dad. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. They sent a foreclosure notice." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Mark, her husband of 5 years, had always struck me as ambitious, perhaps a bit too polished, but I'd attributed it to the confidence of a young man making his way in the world. He worked in corporate finance, a world of numbers and projections I never quite understood. "Sweetheart," I said, my own voice steadier than I felt. "You come home. Both of you. Pack whatever you need. There's more than enough room here. We'll figure the rest out together." The relief in her voice was a physical thing, a weight lifting. "Oh, Dad. Are you sure? We wouldn't be a burden." "Don't be silly," I told her, my heart aching for her. "This is your home. It always will be." 3 days later, they arrived not with a few suitcases, but with a U-Haul truck that seemed far too large for a temporary stay. As they unloaded boxes, I watched Mark. He moved with an efficient, almost restless energy. While Eleanor hugged me, her face buried in my shoulder as she whispered her thanks, Mark's eyes were already scanning the house, taking in the mahogany trim, the original hardwood floors, the landscape painting Helen and I had bought on our anniversary. "This is a beautiful home, Arthur," he said, his handshake firm but his gaze distant, calculating. "They don't build them like this anymore. Must be worth a pretty penny in this market." I smiled politely, but a small, cold knot formed in my stomach. It was an innocent enough observation, the kind anyone might make. But it wasn't the way he said it was the way he looked at my home, not as a place of warmth and memory, but as an asset to be appraised. Over the next few weeks, I tried to dismiss that initial feeling as the overprotectiveness of a father. I adjusted my routines to accommodate them, enjoying the sounds of life filling the house again. Eleanor, ever my thoughtful girl, fell back into the familiar rhythms of her childhood home, helping in the garden and filling the kitchen with the scent of her baking. Mark, however, remained an unsettling presence. He was a man of probing questions, all of them wrapped in a veneer of casual curiosity. He asked about my pension, my investment portfolio, the neighborhood watch schedule, which neighbors were retired and home during the day. He'd sit with me in the evenings, a glass of my best whiskey in hand, and steer the conversation toward my finances. "You've got to be careful these days, Arthur," he'd say, swirling the amber liquid. "A man your age, living alone before we got here. You're a target for all sorts of scams." "I'm careful, Mark," I would reply, keeping my tone mild. But his interest felt less like concern and more like reconnaissance. I noticed him studying the locks on the doors, the brand of the alarm system, the placement of the windows. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find him in my study, staring at the small, fireproof safe tucked away in the closet. "Just admiring your setup," he said with a quick, practiced smile when he saw me. "Smart to have one of these. Every man should." The cold knot in my stomach tightened. He was a financial professional. He knew the value of security. But this felt different. It felt like a hunger. He wasn't just admiring the safe, he was sizing it up. The turning point, the moment my vague unease crystallized into sharp-edged fear, came on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after they'd moved in. Eleanor had gone to her old book club, a weekly ritual she'd happily resumed. Mark and I were having a quiet dinner. "So, that safe upstairs," he said, cutting into a steak. His voice was light, conversational. "What kind of lock does it have? Digital? Combination?" I set my fork down slowly, my appetite vanishing. "It's a good lock, Mark." "Why do you ask?" He shrugged, but his eyes never left my face. "Just curious about home security. With my background, I can't help but think about these things. Risk assessment, you know." He leaned forward, his elbows on my dining table. "But a man in your position, with a house this size, you must have some serious assets to protect. What happens if, God forbid, something were to happen to you? Does Ellie know how to access everything?" The air grew thick. The mention of my hypothetical death was so casual, so clinical, it chilled me to the bone. I saw the slight dilation of his pupils, the way his fingers drummed an impatient rhythm on the polished wood. He wasn't making conversation, he was gathering intelligence. "I have everything in order," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Eleanor knows what she needs to know." "But does she know about the override key?" he pressed. "Most of those models have one. A little brass key for emergencies." The room seemed to shrink around me. "How would you know anything about an override key, Mark?" For a fleeting second, his mask of concerned son-in-law slipped. I saw a flash of cold, hard calculation in his eyes before it was gone, replaced by a smooth, apologetic expression. "I was looking for a Band-Aid last week," he said, the lie rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. "Ellie said to check your bathroom cabinet. I must have opened the wrong drawer in your bedroom by mistake. Saw a little key taped to the bottom. Sorry, didn't mean to snoop." But I remembered that day. He'd been upstairs for a very long time, claiming an upset stomach. Long enough to do more than accidentally open a single drawer. "The first aid kit is in the linen closet in the hall," I said softly. "It always has been." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Right. Must have been the headache I had. I was a bit out of it." The rest of dinner was a strained affair. When it was over, Mark insisted he and Eleanor were tired and went upstairs. I stayed behind to clean the kitchen, my hands moving through the familiar motions of washing and drying while my mind replayed every conversation, every odd question, every red flag I had so willingly ignored. Mark knew about the key. He'd been in my bedroom, in my private drawers. He wasn't just a son-in-law down on his luck. He was a predator who saw me not as family, but as a solution to his problems. And he was sleeping under my roof, just down the hall from my trusting, loving daughter. As I hung the dish towel on its hook, the kitchen gleaming and orderly, I knew the quiet peace of my life had been shattered. Something had to be done. But a man who spent 40 years investigating fraudulent claims knows you don't act on suspicion alone. You wait, you watch, and you gather proof. I climbed the stairs, my feet heavy with a new and terrible weight. The door to my bedroom was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness where a solid, closed door should have been. I always closed it. It was a habit ingrained over a lifetime. I froze on the top step, my hand gripping the banister, listening to the silence of the house. Pushing the door open, I stepped into my room. At first glance, everything seemed normal. The bed was made with military precision. My reading glasses were on the nightstand. But my eyes, trained to spot discrepancies, immediately found the flaws. The closet door, which I always shut completely, hung open an inch. And the second drawer of my dresser, the one where I kept my most important papers, wasn't quite flush. A tiny corner of a manila folder was peeking out, a yellow flag of violation. My stomach clenched. I pulled the drawer open. The contents had been rifled through. My insurance policies, bank statements, the deed to the house, they had been handled, examined, and put back in a clumsy approximation of their original order. And the small brass key, the one I kept taped to the underside of the drawer for my own emergency use, was gone. I ran my fingers over the smooth wood where it had been. Nothing. A cold rage, clean and sharp, burned through me. This wasn't a random search. This was a targeted intrusion into the most private corners of my life. He had been through my things, cataloging my worth, planning his next move. The audacity of it, the profound disrespect, was staggering. He saw me as an obstacle, a resource to be plundered. A foolish old man too lost in his grief and his routines to notice the fox in his henhouse. He was wrong. I carefully closed the drawer, leaving everything exactly as I'd found it. If Mark believed his trespass had gone unnoticed, it was crucial to let him maintain that illusion. Let him grow bolder. Let him think he was in control. Because now I knew. This wasn't just about unemployment. This was about something far darker. And I would be ready for him. That night, sleep was an impossibility. I lay in the dark, my mind a churning vortex of betrayal and strategy. Every creak of the old house, sounds that had once been comforting, now felt like a threat. At 12:47 a.m., my bedside clock casting a soft red glow, I heard it. A soft footfall on the living room floor below. Not Ellie's light step, but a heavier, more deliberate tread. It was Mark. I remained perfectly still, my breathing slow and even, listening as he moved toward the front of the house. Then his voice, a low murmur filtered through the old ductwork, drifted up to my room. "Yeah, it's me. Everyone's asleep." A phone call. He was making a secret call in the dead of night, believing he was unheard. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the cold hardwood, and knelt by the old-fashioned heating vent in the floor, an acoustic quirk of the house Helen and I had discovered years ago. The old man is definitely loaded. Mark's voice came through clearer now, laced with a greedy excitement. I found the statements. Investment portfolios, retirement accounts. We're talking significant money, Liam. More than we thought. My blood ran cold. We're talking. He had an accomplice. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my hand trembling as I fumbled to open the voice memo app. Whatever he said next, I needed a record of it. "Tomorrow night is perfect," Mark continued. "Ellie has her book club. Every Tuesday, 7 to 9. Gives us a clean 2-hour window. I already have the key to his safe. Found it tonight. The old fool keeps it in his dresser drawer, like something out of a movie." Old fool. The words were a drop of poison. I pressed the record button. Look, I know the timeline is tight, but these guys I.O. aren't the patient type. The pressure is on. This has to happen now. Gambling debts. Of course. It explained the desperation, the secrecy, the calculated deception. He wasn't just an opportunistic thief. He was a man backed into a corner by his own demons, and he was willing to sacrifice my daughter and me to save himself. "Arthur's just some lonely old widower," Mark went on, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "He'll be so grateful for the company, he won't suspect a thing." Hell, he was practically asking me for security advice at dinner. The beauty of this is, he'll never suspect family. If he even notices anything is missing, Ellie will convince him he just misplaced it. You know how old people get with their memory. The rage that built in my chest was a physical heat. To hear him plot to use my daughter's love as a tool to gaslight me was a violation far deeper than any theft. "Trust me," he said, his voice full of smug confidence. "By Thursday, we'll be gone. I'll tell Ellie I got a fantastic job offer out of state, something that requires us to move immediately. We'll be on a plane before the old man even knows what hit him." He laughed then, a low, ugly sound that made my skin crawl. "Yeah, well, maybe he should have been more careful about who his daughter married." A life lesson, right? The call ended. I heard him move around downstairs for another minute before his quiet footsteps ascended the stairs. I slid the phone under my pillow and watched his shadow pass by my partially open door. For a long time, I lay in the dark, the recording a toxic weight on my phone. He planned to rob me, abandon my daughter to face the fallout, and drag her into his world of debt and deceit. He had underestimated me at every turn, reducing me to a caricature of a helpless old man. He had no idea that for 40 years, my job was to see through men exactly like him. Men who thought they were smarter than everyone else, who believed their desperation entitled them to other people's lives. Mark wanted to play a game. Fine. But he was about to discover that this old fool still knew how to write the rules. The next morning, I rose at dawn, the same as always. I made coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen, a small island of normalcy in a sea of deceit. When Eleanor came down, yawning and smiling, I greeted her with a warmth that felt both genuine and carefully constructed. "Morning, sweetheart. Sleep well." "Like a log," she said, kissing my cheek. "It feels so good to be home." Mark appeared a few minutes later, looking rested and confident. He was a man with a plan, a man who believed his future was secure. "Morning, Arthur," he said, pouring himself a coffee. "What's on the agenda for today?" "Oh, the usual," I said, buttering my toast. "Might run a few errands. A stop at the hardware store, maybe the bank." I saw the flicker of interest in his eyes. "The bank? Everything all right?" "Dad's just meticulous," Eleanor said with a laugh. "He likes to check his balances in person." "Old school." "Not meticulous," I corrected gently. "Just careful." "You can't be too careful." "You're absolutely right," Mark agreed, a little too eagerly. "Especially at your age. It's a jungle out there." There it was again. "At your age." The casual, dismissive branding. "Actually, I've been thinking," I said, making a show of yawning. "All this excitement has me worn out. I think I'll take one of those sleeping pills my doctor gave me tonight and turn in early." I watched his face closely. The subtle relaxation of his shoulders, the almost imperceptible widening of his smile. It was exactly what he wanted to hear. "That's a great idea, Arthur," he said, his voice full of false concern. "You need your rest." After they left for a walk, I had my window. I drove not to the bank, but to a small electronics shop on the other side of town. "I need a camera," I told the young clerk. "Something small, wireless, with excellent night vision and motion detection." "Setting up some home security?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. An hour later, I was back home, the tiny camera nestled in my pocket. In my bedroom, I found the perfect hiding spot, tucked between a set of leather-bound history books on my bookshelf, with a clear, unobstructed view of the dresser and the center of the room. I used my phone to check the live feed, adjusting the angle until it was perfect. Next, I went to my workshop in the basement. I found what I was looking for in a box of old party supplies, a spring-loaded confetti cannon from a New Year's Eve party years ago. The mechanism was simple. I carefully emptied the paper confetti and refilled the canister with a custom mix, 2 large containers of the finest, most persistent glitter I could find at the craft store, 1 silver, 1 gold. The kind that clings to fabric, hair, and skin and follows you for weeks. Back in my room, I rigged the glitter-filled cannon inside the second dresser drawer. I positioned it carefully so that anyone reaching toward the back of the drawer, where the key was supposed to be, would trip the spring-loaded trigger. To complete the deception, I placed a worthless old luggage key at the front of the drawer, an enticing and easy target. The trap was set. It was not a trap of violence, but of humiliation. A trap of undeniable, sparkling evidence. That evening, I played my part. At dinner, I feigned fatigue. Afterwards, in the living room, I made a show of rubbing my temples. "I'm going to head up," I announced around 9 o'clock. "That sleeping pill is calling my name." "Good night, Dad," Eleanor said, looking up from her book. "Sleep well." "Sweet dreams, Arthur," Mark added, his eyes gleaming. I went upstairs, went through the motions of getting ready for bed, and then lay down fully clothed on top of the covers, my phone in my hand, the camera's live feed open on the screen. The stage was set. The audience of one was waiting. All that was left was for the star of the show to make his entrance. The minutes stretched into hours. I lay motionless, listening to the house settle. Just after 1 a.m., I heard Ellie's footsteps on the stairs, followed by the soft click of the guest room door. Mark stayed downstairs. I imagined him watching the clock, giving my sleeping pill time to work its magic. At 2:17 a.m., the motion sensor on the camera app sent a silent notification to my phone. A shadow filled the doorway of my room on the screen. He stood there for a full minute, a dark silhouette listening for any sound of movement. Satisfied, he slipped inside. He moved with a quiet, arrogant confidence, a thief who believed his victim was helpless. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my breathing remained slow and steady. On the screen, I watched him cross to the dresser. He pulled the drawer open silently. I saw his hand reach inside, past the decoy key, toward the back. The explosion, when it came, was a muffled pop, followed instantly by a sound like 1,000 tiny bells as the glitter erupted. It was glorious. A strangled curse echoed through the quiet room. Mark stumbled back, a shimmering cloud of silver and gold descending upon him. That was my cue. What was that? I called out, sitting up with a practiced, groggy motion. I flicked on the bedside lamp. The light flooded the room, illuminating a scene of pure comedic justice. Mark stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and disbelief, covered from head to toe in sparkling, festive glitter. He looked like a fallen disco ball. "Mark," I said, injecting the perfect amount of bewildered confusion into my voice. "What on earth are you doing in my room?" He sputtered, wiping at his face, which only served to smear the glitter into a shimmering paste. I heard a noise," he stammered. "I thought someone was breaking in." "Breaking in?" I asked, my gaze traveling over his sparkling form. "And you decided to dress for the occasion?" Footsteps pounded in the hall. "Dad? What was that noise? Are you okay?" Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her face etched with alarm. She stopped short, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. Me, sitting in bed looking befuddled. And her husband, standing beside my open dresser, glittering like a Christmas ornament. "Charlie," she whispered, her voice a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Why are you covered in glitter?" "It was some kind of trap," he said weakly. Her eyes snapped to me. "Dad, you have traps in your furniture." "Not that I'm aware of, sweetheart," I said honestly. "Then why," she said, turning back to her husband, her voice losing its softness, "were you in my father's dresser drawer in the middle of the night?" "I was looking for," he trailed off, his lie failing him. "I was looking for a sleeping pill for you." "You were restless." "My sleeping pills," I interjected gently, "are in the bathroom cabinet. Where they've always been." The silence that followed was heavy and damning. I watched my daughter's face as the pieces clicked into place. The trust in her eyes began to curdle into a horrified understanding. "Let me get this straight," she said, her voice dangerously low. "You snuck into my father's room while he was asleep and went through his private things, looking for something you knew wasn't there." "It's not what it looks like," he insisted, his desperation making him sparkle all the more. "Then what is it like, Mark?" Her voice cracked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my husband is a thief. Ellie, you have to trust me." That was when I knew she needed more than a glitter-covered confession. She needed the unvarnished truth, in his own words. "Sweetheart," I said, picking up my phone from the nightstand. "I think there's something you need to hear." Mark's face went pale beneath the shimmer. "Arthur, don't." "Play it, Dad," Eleanor commanded, her eyes never leaving her husband's. I pressed play. Mark's confident, condescending voice filled the room. "The old man is definitely loaded. The old fool keeps it in his dresser drawer. My gambling debts aren't going away. David's just some lonely old widower. Ellie will convince him he just misplaced it. You know how old people get with their memory." With every word, I watched my daughter's heart break. The man she loved, the man she had trusted and defended, was a stranger. A predator who saw her father as a mark and her love as a tool. When the recording finished with his plan to flee the state with her, I hit stop. The silence was absolute, broken only by a soft sob that escaped Eleanor's lips. She looked at Mark, her face a ruin of tears and betrayal. "Gambling debts?" she whispered. "You were going to rob my father? You were going to use me to make him think he was losing his mind." "Ellie, I can explain." "No," she said, and I saw a new strength, a core of steel, form within her. She straightened up, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "No, you can't. You have explained everything perfectly." She pointed a trembling finger toward the door. Get your things. And get out of my father's house." He stood there for a moment, a pathetic, glittering monument to his own greed and deceit. Then, defeated, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving a trail of shimmering failure on my bedroom carpet. Eleanor sank into the chair by my bed, her body shaking. "Dad, I am so sorry. I brought him here. I trusted him." I reached out and took her hand. It was cold and trembling. "This is not your fault, Ellie. You have a good and trusting heart. That is a virtue, not a weakness." A few minutes later, we heard the front door slam shut, followed by the sound of a car engine roaring to life, and then fading into the night. The silence that returned was different from the one before. It was not empty, it was clean. "Can I stay for a while?" she asked, her voice small. "Sweetheart," I said, squeezing her hand. "You're home." In the months that followed, the quiet rhythm of my life returned, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was a shared quiet, filled with the soft sounds of healing. Eleanor found a job at the local library, a place of stories and gentle order that seemed to soothe her soul. We fell into a comfortable routine of shared meals and quiet evenings. The house felt like a home again. One Saturday morning, as we sat in the kitchen with our coffee, Eleanor looked at me with a small, wry smile. "You know," she said, "I think Mom would have been proud of the glitter bomb." I smiled back, a genuine, unburdened smile. She always did appreciate a bit of creative problem-solving. The pain of Mark's betrayal had not vanished, but it had begun to transform. It was a lesson, paid for in heartache, about the importance of boundaries, of self-respect, and of seeing people for who they truly are, not who we wish them to be. I had learned that my quiet life did not make me weak, and my age did not make me a fool. It had, in fact, given me the wisdom to protect what I hold most dear. Outside, the first blossoms of spring were beginning to appear on the branches of the old oak trees. It was a new season. And for the first time in a long time, it felt full of promise.